Hey, it's Brian Wright. This is the Daily Bee. Hey, it's Brian Wright from BrianWright732.com. Also, Brian Wright732 on Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. Find me on Facebook, whatever. So, here's my thing. If you're going to use terminology, you got to understand it besides a surface understanding. Meaning, you don't just say and do things because someone told you to do them. If you understand why, it's going to make sense. It's not just the what. It's not what to do. You can be trained to do anything. You can be trained to respond in any way. But by understanding why, you can be deeply engaged in the process. And here's where I'm going with it. So there's a word that we use in martial arts culture, and it's called us. Some people spell it OSS. The way we spell it here is OSU. That's how I was told. That's how I was taught from Japanese perspective. It's not a real word from the Webster Dictionary of Japan. It's a word that comes out of martial culture, meaning military culture. It was adopted by the mob. It was adopted by martial arts. It was adopted by a lot of organizational, combat derivative stuff. You got to remember too, in Japan, Japanese culture, the Yakuza, which is their mob, post-World War II, it really saw a heavy rise, and a lot of ex-military that couldn't get jobs ended up going into the mob, so they brought a lot of their culture into it, and that's where you get a lot of the terminology. Then you've got in karate in Japan, especially in the full contact arts, a lot of them were funded by construction companies and things of that nature, so they had a little bit of the military and the mob influence in terms of culture and hierarchy. So, that aside, the word us is just like in the United States military where you have hua and things like that, which are the word that's used in a positive affirmation when the drill instructor or the higher ranking person tells you to do something. So just think of it like hua is not going to be in the Webster Dictionary, but it has a very specific meaning for the guys that say it. Now, when it comes to us in martial culture, a lot of people just use it to respond when they're told to do something, or they use it to say yes. But how it was taught to me in Japan by people that are continuing the tradition of it is that us means yes, I will try as hard as I can. So when you use the word, if you just understand the what, if you're saying us because someone told you to say it at these particular times, it's just a sound. But if you understand its meaning and how it's supposed and how the intention of application for it, then it'll have some value. So when you say us, which means yes, I will try as hard as I can, or yes, I will give you 100%, yes, I'm fully committed to what I'm doing, now it becomes a positive affirmation word. It becomes a real commitment. And it becomes a teaching tool for me as well. So when I say to someone, go do this, and they say us, and then they half-ass it, I say to them, look, you said us at the beginning of this, which was your agreement to give me 100%. You're not giving me 100%. So don't inappropriately use that word. If you're not prepared to do the work at the level in which you agreed, don't agree. Because when you say us, it's an agreement between you and me. I give you a challenge, you agree to give me 100%. That's the agreement. So every time you say us, it's not just yes. It's an agreement between you and the person you're speaking with that you're going to give them everything you have. And if you understand that and you respect that, you're going to be backing up your words all the time. You're also going to be positively affirming the commitments that you make. So when someone says, good job, and you go, us, you're like, yes, I gave it everything I could. Yes, I'm fully engaged. I'm fully committed. There's a different way to it. And that's why is so much more important than what. And in martial culture, just like the hierarchy of many cultures that we have, from work culture to family to whatever, where we have a hierarchy, you have the person on top and the people below. When you're below, a lot of times you'll have an iron-fisted leader above who's telling you to do stuff, and you just do it because you were told. You're not doing it because you understand. You're doing it because you want to advance, you want to get paid, you don't want to get in trouble. That's the worst way to go about stuff. If you're going to be going about stuff because you don't want to get in trouble or you just want to incur favor, there's no depth to it. It's just this superficial political relationship garbage. But if you're doing things because you're deeply engaged, you're deeply involved, you really understand, you have the right intent, Now we're going to actually create something positive, something worth fighting for. And so, that's why in combat arts, it makes sense to say things in a way that we have a commitment, that we're saying we believe so fully that we're engaged and we're willing to fight and struggle and sacrifice to achieve. For me, that's pretty much the best way to go about anything, because if you're going to choose to make that commitment, you have to be fully involved. And that's where the satisfaction aspect of things come together, because I truly believe that happiness is not the goal in life. Happiness can be a donut. Happiness can be a beer. Happiness can be a cigarette. It can be driving really fast. It can be inconsequential or long-term consequential if done too much nonsense. Satisfaction is doing things that there's a level of peace to your core, because you're just checked off all the boxes of the things that matter to you. So there's a deep connection to it. So if we're doing things on that superficial, we're going to have happy and unhappy, just very simple, and we'll go back and forth. But if we have satisfied, that's different. That's where confidence, that's where connection, that's where growth, that's where new opportunity, that's where a lot of really substantial, consequential growth opportunities come about. So when you say the word us, don't just say the word. Understand its meaning. Understand where it comes from. That's for anybody doing anything that's cultural. I wrote an article at brianwright732.com recently where I was speaking about how a lot of people use other languages inappropriately because they fake culture or attach certain pop ideas about culture to the arts they do. Meaning, if you do Muay Thai, which is a Thai art, where you're using all the language of it, but you really don't understand the culture. You don't understand the history behind the words. You don't even understand the language of how to use the words appropriately. Or you're doing Japanese martial arts and you have the same problem. Or you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the professor thing. Professor is teacher in Portuguese. And they speak Portuguese in Brazil. Professor has a different meaning in Portuguese than it does in English. So in North America, when we're using the word professor to describe our Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor, the uninitiated, or the uneducated, I should say, in terms of where the words come from, can you attach the English meaning to it, which is completely inappropriate. Your martial arts instructor should only be called a professor if he has a degree, a higher degree from a university that he's actually been given the title of professor. So when you call your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor professor, if you're not using it in the Portuguese context and using it in the English context, you're misrepresenting the word. You're better off calling that person coach or teacher in an English context. If you're in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school that has the Brazilian culture infused, and you're using the Portuguese language and the Brazilian terminology to describe the moves and your greetings and your affirmations, and your school is fully immersed in that culture, one thing. But if you're picking and choosing and the only Portuguese word you're using is professor, and maybe one or two words that you're using to describe a couple techniques in Portuguese, but if it's like lightly sprinkled on top of your English and it's being inappropriately used, there's something wrong there. That's not really an appropriate usage of things. It's the same thing with Japanese terminology. There's an organization out there that took Japanese karate, they broke it all down into English. They teach their classes completely in English, but they kept the titles for the instructors, which is another bullshit usage of words where they're trying to keep the exotic titles that people don't really understand the meanings of, so that they can take that leadership position, make it more exotic, and try and elevate it even more, which is nonsense in itself. If you're teaching Japanese karate, teach Japanese karate. Use the Japanese terminology. Explain why the terms are what they are. Because a lot of the terms, like, reverse punch, round kick, they have words attached to them that have a little bit more deeper of a meaning in Japanese than they do in English. If you understand all that and you can explain that and you can bring more value to what's being done, that's one thing. But if you're just picking and choosing and calling yourself sensei, shihan, and all this nonsense, without all the other stuff that makes that sensei and shihan terminology valuable, you're just you're just marketing at that point, and you're lacking in substance. Because sensei, from Japanese, the same way professor, a lot of people say sensei, and they don't really understand that's a simple term. It means teacher. And you will call elders in your family in Japan sensei as well. So you would call your grandparents sensei. You would call elderly people that you respect in your community sensei, because they are people that have wisdom. They are people that have been here longer than you, and they can provide knowledge. So out of respect, you call them sensei. It doesn't mean master. It doesn't mean grandmaster. It doesn't mean anything beyond. This is a person that knows more than you do, and they are sharing that experience. So out of respect, you are calling them teacher. Shihan is it's a high-level term for instructor, but it doesn't mean anything grand. It just means that within this organization you hold a specific position where you are a high-level teacher. You're the teacher of teachers, basically. But again, you have to understand all these things before you go and use them. The majority of people in martial culture in the United States are using words because their instructor told them to use them, or they're using words inappropriately because their instructor created this exotic idea around them to sell some grand idea. And it's not practicality, it's not hierarchy, it's not basic understanding. It gets into mystical and magical nonsense, which, if you know me, you know there's no such thing as magic, and there's nothing mystical about any of the stuff that we're doing. It's all very straightforward, it's very practical, it has very specific traditions of effectiveness attached to them, is what it is. So, after all of this being said, the point is, words and their meanings matter, because that connects with your intent. And if your intentions and your understandings and your actions come together, you tend to have deeper outcomes. So we don't want to just focus on operating on the surface and doing things because we were told, and then because we were told, we do it because we don't want to get in trouble. That's the worst reasoning behind anything. Yes, you trust somebody that's telling you to do something, so you're doing it because A, you don't want to get in trouble, and then you justify that by saying, I'm doing it because they must know more than me, whatever. But if the people are not explaining the why, you're missing a tremendous amount here. So understand the why, understand the history, understand the reason, connect that with your intent, connect that with your actions, and now you have authenticity. Being authentic is really important. Being knowledgeable is really important. Having the right intent is really important. But if you're an instructor that's not providing the knowledge to your students so that they can find that, you're a shitty instructor. And if you're a student that's not searching these things out, you're on the surface and you're not investigating enough. And you're not fully invested in being a student. For me, we're all students, no matter what level we're at. That's why I hate the term master, because there is no mastery while alive, because there's nothing but evolving. So then one step you master, there's another step to go on. So there's constant progression. And so it's extremely important to keep that beginner's mindset and always dive as deep as we possibly can and just investigate and investigate and investigate, so that our understanding of the why just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So our intention, our action, and all that just gets stronger, and our results become more satisfying, more fulfilling, stronger foundations, all that kind of stuff. So authenticity matters, knowledge matters, intent matters. Don't waste words because someone told you to. Demand that you find out. And if your instructor doesn't have the ability to give you the answer to those words, you may want to consider getting another instructor. It's as simple as that. You have an inauthentic person standing in front of you trying to con you into following them. I don't care how street lethal that you think their hands are. If they don't have a deep understanding of the entire culture of what they do, they're giving you an incomplete product. Because at the end of the day, especially in combat sports, we're learning how to fight, but we're not learning how to fight because we're seeking out a fight. It's just in case. It's to be prepared. But for the most part, we're not going to run into fights. So what's the point of what we do? Yes, it's being prepared, but it's also being more educated, thoroughly involved in something that gives us the ability to then take that commitment and that involvement and that understanding and apply it to everything else. So if we have a deep relationship with what we do in the gym, we have now the skills to have a deep relationship outside the gym. If we have a shallow understanding of what we do and all we do is take direction, that's the person we're going to be outside as well. So you want to be someone in control of your life and understanding your life, leading your life. All right? So I've ranted quite a bit today, and I haven't even had that much coffee. So this is Brian Wright, and I am out.